The wind howled across the red plains of Virelia, a lonely world on the edge of the galaxy. Its twin suns hung low in the orange sky, painting the cracked soil in shades of gold and rust. Once this place had been empty, only dust, storms, and silence. But now it was home to the last survivors of a broken race. They were humans, thin, tired, and scarred by the memory of a lost world. It had been 10 years since the fall of Earth. A great war had torn through the solar system, and humanity's proud cities had turned to ashes. The survivors had fled into space, searching for any planet that would take them in. Most worlds turned them away. Some feared them. Others simply didn't care. Refugees, beggars, wanderers, humans were called many things, but never welcome. On Virelia, things were no different at first. The planet was ruled by several alien races who valued trade and profit above all else. They saw the human ships land in the desert and whispered that the newcomers would soon die off. They offered no help, no food, no water, only cold stares from shining alien eyes. But then came the Tiraki. They were not a strong race. They were gentle, graceful beings with soft blue skin, tall bodies, and large golden eyes. The Tiraki were known for their music, their art, and their kindness. They believed every life had meaning, even those who had lost everything. Among them was a young scientist named Leora. She worked in a small research outpost near the human landing site. When she saw the refugees struggling to build tents out of broken metal, something inside her could not stay silent. "They are dying," she said to her commander one evening, looking out at the human camp through the glass dome. "They have no food, no water. They have children there," the commander sighed. "We cannot interfere, Leora. The council forbids it. Humans are not our responsibility." But Leora didn't listen. That night, when the suns fell behind the horizon, she filled her hover cart with supplies, grain, clean water, and blankets, and drove across the red plains to the human camp. The humans watched her approach with caution. Their leader, Captain Nathan Hale, stood tall though his body was weak from hunger. His beard had grown rough, and his eyes were the tired gray of a stormy sea. When the Tiraki scientist stepped out, her blue skin glowing faintly under the twin moons, he raised his hand in warning. "Who are you?" he asked. "If you came to take what little we have left, there's nothing here." "I came to give," Leora said softly. "Not to take." She opened the back of her cart, showing the supplies inside. The smell of real food drifted through the air, and the starving children nearby gasped. Leora smiled gently. "You are welcome to it." Captain Hale's eyes widened. You would share with us?" "Why?" Leora looked at him for a long moment. "Because no one else will. Because kindness costs nothing." That night, for the first time in many months, the humans ate until they were full. They drank clean water and wrapped themselves in warm blankets. Children laughed again. Some of them even sang softly around the fires. It was a small miracle, but to them, it was everything. In the days that followed, Leora returned again and again. She taught the humans how to find edible roots in the soil and how to build small solar collectors from scrap metal. She brought medicines from her lab and treated the sick. Slowly, the human camp began to change. They built huts from stone, planted fields, and even repaired their damaged ship. At first, other Tiraki whispered behind Leora's back. They said she was foolish to waste time on a dying race. But as weeks passed, they saw something new growing on Virelia. They saw humans standing tall again, working hard, smiling despite their pain, and slowly they too began to help. Even the Tiraki Council eventually approved food and building aid for the humans. The once empty desert became a growing village of hope. One day, Captain Hale walked with Leora along the edge of the new fields. The crops were green and strong under the sunlight, swaying in the wind. He turned to her and said, "You saved us. If not for you, there would be no humans left on this planet." Leora smiled faintly. "I only did what was right." Hale shook his head. "You did more than that. You gave us back our dignity." He looked toward the sky where a few old human ships rested on the horizon like sleeping beasts. "We may never have a home like Earth again," he said quietly. "But because of you, we have hope." Leora tilted her head, curious. "Hope?" "Yes," Hale replied. "Hope that kindness still exists in this galaxy. And I promise you this, Leora. The human race will never forget what you've done for us." She laughed softly. "Promises fade with time, Captain. One day you will grow strong again and you will forget about us." But Hale only smiled. "No, humans never forget kindness. Not ever. Years passed. The village became a town, and the town became a small city. Humans learned to trade with other species, grow their own food, and even build new ships. Children who once cried from hunger now ran through the fields shouting and laughing. They spoke both human and Tiraki languages, calling Leora Aunt Leah whenever she visited. She would sit with them under the shade trees and tell stories about the stars. In return, they showed her their machines, small inventions made from old metal parts. Humanity was learning again, step by step, and the Tiraki were proud. But even in peace, the memory of Earth's destruction never left them. Every evening, Captain Hale would stand on a hill outside the settlement, looking up at the night sky. He would whisper, "We will rise again," and he meant it. One night, as the stars shimmered above, Leora came to find him there. "You still look at the sky," she said, standing beside him. Hale nodded. "It reminds me of home, of what we lost." Leora looked at him gently. "And of what you found," she added. "You found friends here," he smiled. "That we did." They stood in silence for a while, watching the sky glow with faraway constellations. Then Leora spoke again. "When I first saw your people, I thought you would not survive. But you proved me wrong. You humans are different," Hale chuckled. "Different how?" "You carry your pain like fuel," she said. "Most species break when they lose everything. But you humans, when you fall, you rise stronger. You learn. You remember." Hale turned to her, his eyes calm but firm. "That's because we have something to fight for, each other, and those who showed us mercy when we needed it most." Leora smiled softly. "Then may that memory guide you always." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "It will." Decades later, Captain Hale was gone, but his words lived on. The children of Viralia grew into explorers, traders, and scientists. They carried the story of Leora and the Tiraki wherever they went. Every ship that left Viralia bore a single phrase painted near its nameplate: "We remember." And in the Great Hall of Memory, built in the heart of the human city, stood a tall statue of Leora. Her gentle face looked down at the people she had once saved. At the base of the statue were carved these words: "When the galaxy turned its back, the Tiraki opened their hands. We will never forget." Far away on another world, young humans grew up hearing the story of the Tiraki. Teachers would end the lesson with the same saying: "Humans never forget kindness. One day we will repay it." No one knew how or when. But deep in every human heart, the promise lived on, waiting for the day it would be fulfilled. 100 years had passed since the day the Tiraki helped humanity rise again. The dusty red plains of Viralia were no longer a land of struggle. They had become a place of light, filled with cities of glass and steel, glowing softly under the twin suns. The humans who once arrived as refugees were now builders, thinkers, and explorers. They had rebuilt their strength, not through conquest, but through unity and memory. Every generation carried the story of Leora and the Tiraki in their hearts. In schools across the human colonies, children still repeated the same old phrase: "Humans never forget kindness." And they meant it. The age of renewal from their humble settlements on Viralia, humanity began to spread once more among the stars. They built ships faster than light, founded colonies on distant worlds, and rediscovered technologies lost during the fall of Earth. But this time, they were wiser. They remembered what it felt like to be weak and alone, and they swore never to let others suffer as they once did. Human fleets carried not just weapons, but medicine, food, and engineers. They were known across the galaxy as the helpers, the rebuilders, the ones who answered distress calls. Other species began to respect them, not out of fear, but admiration. And in the grand human capital of New Terra, at the center of a shining city, stood a tall monument. It was shaped like two hands joined together, one human, one Tiraki. Below the monument were the simple words: "They shared light when we had only darkness." Every leader, soldier, and child who looked upon it remembered that promise. The shadow of war but peace in the galaxy was fragile. Far beyond human and Tiraki space, a dark empire grew stronger, the Karn Dominion. The Karn were a proud and warlike race, tall and covered in thick armor-like skin. Their fleets spread through the stars, conquering weaker worlds, forcing entire civilizations to serve them. To them, kindness was weakness. Mercy was foolish. And when they looked upon the gentle Tiraki, They saw easy prey. The Taraki had no armies. They believed deeply in peace and refused to build weapons of war. When the Karn ships first appeared in their skies, the Taraki tried to talk. They sent messages of peace offering trade and friendship. The Karn replied with fire. In a single week, Taraki cities fell. The once bright towers were turned into rubble. Millions fled into the forests or underground shelters. Their peaceful songs were drowned by the sound of explosions. No one came to help. Neighboring races feared the Karn too much. They turned their ships away, pretending they didn't see the destruction. The Taraki homeworld, once full of art and color, was becoming silent. But not all hope was lost. Deep beneath the capital city, a small group of Taraki scientists and leaders sent out one final message, a desperate cry for help. It was sent across the galaxy to every known race, even to the edge of human space. Please, the message said simply, if there is anyone who remembers us, help us. Our world is dying. Days passed. No one answered. Then, on the 5th day, a signal came through the static. The voice was calm, firm, human. This is Fleet Command of the United Human Systems. Hold on. Help is coming. The decision on New Terra, the great meeting hall of the Human Council, was filled with tension. The message from the Taraki played on a large hollow screen. Their cities were burning. Their people were fleeing. Admiral Ross, commander of the 5th Human Defense Fleet, stood before the council. His gray uniform was neat, his eyes sharp but full of emotion. They saved us once, he said, his voice steady. When we had nothing, they gave us everything. We cannot forget that. Some council members looked uneasy. The Karn Dominion is powerful, said one of them. If we interfere, we risk open war. Admiral Ross didn't blink. So be it. A younger counselor leaned forward. You would risk billions of lives for one small race? Ross turned to him. They risked their lives for us when we were smaller, weaker, and dying. The Taraki didn't think twice. Neither should we. Silence filled the room. Then the High Chancellor spoke softly. Do we have the strength to face the Karn? Ross nodded. We do. But more than strength, we have reason. The Chancellor looked around at the other leaders. One by one, they nodded in agreement. The vote was taken. The result was clear. Humanity would go to war, not for conquest, but for gratitude. The march of the fleets. The stars came alive with movement. From dozens of worlds, human fleets gathered. Ships of every class, carriers, cruisers, medical vessels, and transport ships rose into orbit. Their hulls gleamed silver and blue under the light of distant suns. On the side of every ship, painted in bold letters, were 3 words. For the Taraki. Families gathered at spaceports, watching their loved ones leave. Some cried, some saluted, but all felt pride. They knew this war was not like others. It was a war of honor. In the command ship Valor's Promise, Admiral Ross looked out over the stars. Set course for GalacticPrime, he ordered. Full jump. The stars stretched into streaks of light as the great ships leapt into hyperspace. The Taraki's last hope. Meanwhile, on the Taraki homeworld, the situation had grown desperate. The Karn's ground forces had reached the capital city. The sky burned with fire as ships bombed from above. Leora's descendants, scientists and leaders like their great ancestor, worked tirelessly to evacuate civilians. But they knew it would not be enough. The Karn would soon destroy everything. In an underground shelter, a young Taraki named Elian, a historian, sat before a flickering screen, listening to the fading messages from other cities. His people were losing hope. He whispered, "Where are the humans? Did they forget us after all?" Just then, the sky above shook with thunder. The Karn generals turned their gaze upward, expecting another bombardment. But what they saw instead froze them in shock. The clouds split open, and out of the light emerged massive human starships. Hundreds of them. Their engines glowed bright as suns. The humans had come. The return of humanity. The human fleet entered the battle like a storm. Fighters swarmed the skies, targeting Karn ships with perfect coordination. Giant carriers released waves of rescue craft toward the surface. The Taraki, hiding in shelters and ruins, looked up through the smoke and saw hope return in the form of human ships. For many of them, it felt like a miracle, a story from old legends come true. In the command center aboard Valor's Promise, Admiral Ross gave his orders calmly. All ships protect civilian zones. Prioritize evacuation transports. And remember, this is not revenge. This is repayment. Yes, Admiral, the officers replied. The Karn's surprise. The Karn commander, General Jar, was furious. He had never seen such coordination from a species he considered weak. How did they gather such power? He roared. They were nothing once, refugees. His aide looked uneasy. They are not the same humans, General. They fight with purpose, with loyalty, Jar growled. Then they will learn what it means to defy the Karn. He sent all ships forward. The battle that followed shook the system. Stars flared, ships burned, and the void itself seemed to tremble. But the humans did not break. They fought harder with each loss, driven not by hatred, but by love for those they protected. And slowly, the tide began to turn, hope reborn on the surface. Elian and other Tiraki watched as human rescue ships landed among the ruins. Soldiers in silver armor carried supplies and medical kits instead of guns. They helped wounded Tiraki stand, gave water to the thirsty, and comforted crying children. Elian could hardly believe it. They came back, he whispered. After all these years, they remembered. A human officer smiled at him. We always remember. As the human and Tiraki flags flew side by side above the smoking city, a new chapter of the galaxy began. The weak had helped the broken. The broken had risen to protect the kind, and humanity had proven once again that kindness never dies. It only waits for its turn to return. The stars over GalacticPrime burned bright with battle. The sky was filled with fire, light, and the roar of engines as two mighty forces clashed above the planet. Human ships moved through the blackness like silver arrows. Their formation was tight, their strategy perfect. Across from them, the dark fleets of the Karn Dominion formed a wall of steel and flame. The Karn believed no one could defeat them. But that belief was about to change forever. From the command deck of the human flagship Valor's Promise, Admiral Ross stood calmly, watching the battle unfold through a massive viewing screen. The reflections of explosions danced across his face. Behind him, officers moved quickly between consoles, calling out status reports. Enemy ships closing on Sector 3, one officer shouted. Defensive line holding, replied another. The 5th Cruiser Division is engaging. Ross nodded. Keep formation tight. Protect the evacuation corridors. No Tiraki ship falls while we still stand. The sky of fire on the surface of GalacticPrime, the world trembled. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Yet through the clouds of war, the people could see the light of human ships above, glowing like stars of hope. In the city ruins, Elian, the young Tiraki historian, guided a group of civilians toward a human evacuation craft. Stay together, he called, helping an elderly Tiraki walk. The humans will take us to safety. The human soldiers on the ground wore armor marked with both the human crest and the Tiraki symbol. They spoke kindly, offering food and first aid to anyone in need. Their mission was not destruction, it was rescue. One of the soldiers, a young woman named Lieutenant Mira, helped Elian lift a child into the ship. She smiled warmly. We'll get you out of here. The Admiral promised no Tiraki would be left behind. Elian looked at her, eyes wide. Why do you risk your lives for us? Mira paused for a moment. Then she said softly, because you did the same for us long ago. The Karn's challenge high above the planet, the Karn flagship Iron Fang advanced through the chaos. It was a monstrous vessel, larger than any human ship. Its captain, General Jar, glared at the tactical display. These humans fight like madmen, he growled. They do not retreat even when outnumbered. His advisor looked uneasy. They fight for something greater than victory, General. I think they fight for gratitude. Jar laughed, but there was no joy in it. Gratitude? Fools! The galaxy respects only strength. He slammed his clawed hand on the console. Target their flagship! I will crush their spirit myself. Moments later, beams of energy burst from the Iron Fang, striking toward Valor's Promise. The fight for hope. The entire ship shuddered as the attack hit. Alarms echoed through the corridors. Sparks flew from panels, and the lights dimmed for a second. Shields down to 60%, shouted an engineer. Return fire, Ross commanded. Concentrate on the Iron Fang's engines. The battle raged on. Human ships darted between enemy lines using clever maneuvers and teamwork. They fought not with anger but with purpose. Every pilot remembered the old stories of how the Tiraki had once saved their ancestors. This was not just war, it was repayment. In the hangar bays, squadrons of human fighters launched into the void. One pilot, Commander Aiden Brooks, led his team through a storm of laser fire. His ship shook, but his voice stayed calm. "Stay tight, Blue Squadron," he said over the radio. "We're clearing a path for the evac ships. For the Taraki, let's make them proud." "Yes, Commander," the pilots replied in unison. Their small fighters weaved through enemy lines, blasting Karn bombers out of the sky. Each explosion lit up the darkness like fireworks. A light in the darkness. Meanwhile, on the surface, Alliance group reached the final transport area. Hundreds of Taraki stood waiting, scared but hopeful. Above them, the sounds of battle echoed like distant thunder. Then, through the clouds, a massive shadow appeared. A Karn landing craft descending fast, weapons glowing red. Panic spread through the crowd. But before the Karn ship could strike, beams of blue light cut across the sky. Human gunships swooped down, firing precision shots that disabled the enemy craft before it could reach the ground. The Taraki cheered, their fear replaced by awe. One elderly Taraki turned to Elian and whispered, "They came back for us." The humans truly remembered. Elian nodded, his eyes full of tears. Yes, they never forgot. The turning point in orbit, the battle reached its peak. The Iron Fang and Valor's Promise faced each other head-on, exchanging devastating fire. "Admiral, enemy shields are weakening," an officer shouted. "Then press the attack," Ross replied. "But remember, capture if possible. We are not destroyers." Another officer turned from his console. "Admiral, they're hailing us." Ross raised a brow. "Open channel." The image of General Jar filled the screen, his armor black and eyes burning with anger. "Human," he growled. "Why do you protect these weak creatures?" "What do they offer you?" Ross met his gaze calmly. "They offered us kindness when no one else did. And humans never forget kindness," Jar sneered. "You would risk your fleets for gratitude?" Ross smiled faintly. "Gratitude is stronger than fear." For a moment, neither spoke. Then the connection ended. The human fleet pressed forward with renewed strength. The power of unity. Throughout the galaxy, observers from other races watched the battle unfold on their screens. Many had doubted the humans would succeed. But as they saw the Karn ships retreating and the Taraki being rescued, something changed in their hearts. They saw what true strength meant, not domination, but loyalty. Not cruelty, but compassion. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to believe in heroes again. Victory and mercy. After long hours of fighting, the Iron Fang finally fell silent. Its engines were disabled, its weapons destroyed. The human fleet surrounded it, but Admiral Ross gave a clear order. Spare their escape pods. Let them live. Even an enemy deserves the chance to change. The humans had won, but without hate. The Taraki homeworld was free. When the smoke cleared and the last Karn ship jumped away, the skies over GalacticPrime shone blue again. The people came out from their shelters, looking up at the human ships still orbiting like silver guardians. The meeting days later, in the Taraki capital, a small ceremony was held. The surviving leaders of both races stood together before the crowd. The humans wore their simple navy uniforms. The Taraki wore robes of white and gold. A lion stood among them, representing his people. His voice trembled as he spoke. "We once gave you food and water when you had nothing, and now you have given us back our lives. How can we ever thank you?" Admiral Ross stepped forward. "You already have. You reminded us of who we are. We did only what was right." Leora's name was spoken many times that day. The Taraki built a monument beside her old one, a tall silver flame wrapped in two hands, one human, one Taraki. At its base were engraved the words, "To those who gave kindness and to those who returned it." The promise of tomorrow, when the last human ships prepared to leave. Thousands of Taraki gathered to watch them rise into the sky. Children waved flags and songs filled the air. Elian looked up and whispered, "Farewell, our friends. You have written your names in our hearts forever." Aboard Valor's Promise, Admiral Ross stood at the window, watching the blue planet shrink behind them. His officer asked quietly, "Was it worth it, sir?" "All the risk?" Ross smiled softly. "More than worth it. Some debts must be paid, not with gold or power, but with honor." He turned to the stars ahead, set course for home. As the fleet jumped into hyperspace, The light of their engines stretched across the night, like a trail of promise through the endless dark. The galaxy remembers in the years that followed. Stories of the battle for GalacticPrime spread across every star system. The humans became known as the Rememberers, the race that never forgot kindness. Other species began to reach out to them, not in fear, but in friendship. For they knew deep in their hearts one truth that echoed through the stars. If you show kindness to a human, they will move worlds for you. And somewhere far beyond the known stars, the spirit of Leora seemed to smile, her dream of peace reborn in the hearts of two united races. The smoke had barely cleared from GalacticPrime, but the humans did not pause to celebrate. Their ships remained in orbit, scanning the planet for survivors and ensuring the last pockets of the Karn forces had left. Admiral Ross moved through the command deck of Valor's Promise, listening to reports and coordinating evacuation efforts. Every Taraki who had survived was being transported to safe zones. Every injured was being treated. Every home that could be salvaged was being rebuilt. This was not a conquest. It was repayment. The meaning of true strength. On the ground, in the capital city's newly secured area, Elion walked among the humans and Taraki together. Streets that had been filled with fear and rubble now rang with the sound of tools and laughter. Children ran to collect building materials, excited to help rebuild their world. Elion turned to Lieutenant Mira, who handed him a crate of food. "I still don't understand," he said softly. "Why would your species risk everything for us?" "The Karn could have destroyed your fleet," Mira shook her head. "We didn't do it for fear or for power. We did it because kindness matters. Because your ancestors helped ours when no one else would." Elion looked around at the humans working tirelessly, and he began to see it. "So, humans repay kindness," he said. "No matter how long it takes." "Yes," Mira replied with a smile. "And when we do it fully." The Karn's realization far from the battlefield and the remnants of the Karn fleet, General Jar and his officers regrouped on a smaller vessel. Their losses had been staggering, their pride shattered. "Impossible," Jar bellowed. "They are weak!" "We should have crushed them in days." His aide stepped forward nervously. "They fought differently, General. They were not fighting for territory, not for power. They fought to save their friends." Jar's golden eyes narrowed. "Friends? A reason so small yet so strong? I do not understand." One of the officers dared to speak. "It is their loyalty, their memory of kindness. They do not forget. They repay." Jar growled in frustration, realizing that this was a power he had never faced before. This was not a fleet, it was a force of honor and promise. And it had defeated him. Rebuilding together back on GalacticPrime, the humans and Taraki worked side by side. Engineers taught Taraki builders how to use human construction techniques. Scientists collaborated to restore the damaged infrastructure. Fields were replanted and water systems repaired. Admiral Ross walked through the city observing the activity. He stopped when he saw a group of children planting trees. Beside them, a human child and a Taraki child worked together, laughing as they dug small holes in the soil. Ross knelt beside them. "What are you planting?" he asked. "A tree of thanks," a Taraki child replied. "For you humans who remembered us." "And for us," the human child added. "Because they will remember kindness too." Ross smiled. He knew that this was more than a repair. It was a promise of the future. Generations of Taraki would grow knowing that someone across the stars remembered them. And generations of humans would grow knowing that helping others is never forgotten. A question of honor. One day, General Jar, captured after the battle, was brought to a human command center. His massive frame towered over the human officers, yet there was unease in his eyes. Admiral Ross met him calmly. "Why attack a peaceful race?" he asked. Jar's voice was low, almost hesitant. They offered nothing of value. They were weak. Ross shook his head. "Value is not always measured in gold or territory. Sometimes value is measured in kindness, in the willingness to help when no one else will." Jar scoffed, but Ross continued. "Do you see now why we fought for them? Because they once helped us, and humans never forget kindness." For a moment, the general said nothing. He looked around at the calm, confident humans who had risked everything, and then at the Taraki who were alive and safe. Finally, he said quietly, "Then, your power is not in your weapons?" Ross nodded. "No. Our strength is in our heart, our loyalty, and our memory of those who have shown us mercy. That is something you cannot destroy. Jar's eyes fell to the floor. For the first time, he understood that this was more than a defeat. It was a lesson. The ceremony of gratitude weeks after the battle, SCIFI-Prime held a ceremony to honor the humans. The city's square was decorated with banners in blue and silver. Citizens, survivors, and children gathered to see the humans who had saved them. Elian stood beside the human officers as the High Tiraki Council spoke. You came when we were in despair. You brought hope when our world was dark. We will never forget your deeds. Admiral Ross stepped forward. We did what any human would do, he said. But your kindness taught us more than you know. You reminded us of who we are. We will carry that memory across the stars. Leora's statue, still standing in the square, seemed to glow in the morning sun. The monument beside it now bore another message. To humanity, who never forget. Children pressed flowers at the base, leaving small tokens of thanks. Adults nodded with respect. And in that moment, the debt of kindness was fulfilled, not with coins or rewards, but with memory, loyalty, and honor. The spread of humanity's code news of the event spread beyond SCIFI-Prime. Across the galaxy, other races began to speak of the humans who never forgot. Stories circulated of ships arriving in time to save entire planets, of fleets willing to fight against impossible odds, and of a species that measured strength by compassion, not cruelty. A diplomat from a distant world said in a council meeting, "We fear the humans less for their weapons. We respect them more for their honor." Another added, "If you show kindness to a human, you gain an ally for eternity. If you betray one, you risk awakening their fury." Even the Karn Dominion, humiliated and defeated, began to whisper of a new kind of power, one that could not be measured by fleets or firepower, but by courage, loyalty, and the promise to repay kindness. The lessons for the future on SCIFI-Prime. Humans continued to help rebuild every village and city. Schools were reopened, hospitals restored, and cultural centers reconstructed. But the most important lesson was not in stone or metal. It was in the hearts of the people. Elian watched a human teacher instruct a group of Tiraki children. "Remember," she said, "a single act of kindness can echo for generations. Always honor those who help you. One day you may return that kindness when it is needed most." Elian smiled, understanding for the first time why humans had become so strong. Strength, he realized, was not in weapons or technology. It was in loyalty, in the courage to act, and in the promise to repay what was given in kindness. A quiet promise. When the work of rebuilding was nearly complete, Admiral Ross stood on a hill overlooking the city. The twin suns of SCIFI-Prime shone down, reflecting off the new buildings and the green fields that had replaced burned lands. Beside him, Lieutenant Mira asked quietly, "Do you think they understand what we truly fight for?" Ross looked at the city, at the Tiraki people smiling and working together, and then at the children planting flowers near Leora's statue. "They will understand," he said. "Not today, not tomorrow, but one day. The memory of kindness lasts longer than any war. And when it is returned, it changes the universe. The galaxy remembers the humans did not leave immediately. They spent months ensuring that SCIFI-Prime was safe, teaching, helping, and guiding. Across the galaxy, the story of SCIFI-Prime became a legend. Humanity's code of honor, the promise to repay kindness, was now part of galactic knowledge. Ships carried the message from system to system: be kind to a human. They will remember. They will repay. And somewhere, far in the deep space, the spirit of Leora seemed to watch with pride. Her dream of friendship and hope had taken root. Humanity had not only survived, they had grown into heroes of the galaxy, a shining example of what it meant to honor kindness. Years had passed since humanity's fleet saved SCIFI-Prime. The planet had been rebuilt, stronger and brighter than ever. Fields stretched across valleys where rubble had once lain. Cities gleamed under twin suns, and the rivers sparkled clean and clear. Children played among the streets, their laughter echoing the songs of a people who had almost been lost. The Tiraki and humans now lived together as equals. Scientists shared knowledge, farmers exchanged techniques, and children learned each other's languages. The bond forged in the fires of war had grown into a friendship of trust and respect. Admiral Ross, older now but still proud, walked through the rebuilt capital with Lieutenant Mira at his side. He looked up at the twin monuments in the square, the first honoring Leora, the Taraki who had saved humanity, and the second honoring the humans who had returned that kindness. "They will never forget," Mira said softly, gesturing to a group of Taraki children planting small trees at the base of the monument. Ross nodded. "Neither will we. That is the promise of humanity, to honor those who showed us kindness and to repay it fully." The Alliance human colonies across the galaxy began to reach out to Taraki worlds. Trade routes were opened, research stations built, and cultural exchanges began. The Taraki were no longer isolated, but part of a larger community where their knowledge, art, and wisdom could shine. Together, humans and Taraki formed the United Alliance of Stars, an organization dedicated not to domination, but to peace, learning, and mutual aid. Elian, now a leader among the Taraki, spoke at one of the first Alliance meetings. "When our people were weak, humanity came to us. They fought not for glory, but for friendship. We have learned that the greatest strength in the galaxy is not in fleets or weapons, but in loyalty and honor." Ross, sitting at the council, nodded silently. He remembered the first battle, the first time humans returned to repay kindness. It had been a risk, but one worth taking. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Compassion is a power stronger than fear. The stories that spread across the stars, the story of GalacticPrime and the humans' repayment, became legendary. On distant worlds, traders spoke of how the humans arrived at just the right time. Scholars wrote of the humans' honor and the lessons they taught the galaxy. And in classrooms on hundreds of planets, children learned the same truth that had guided humanity for generations. Humans never forget a kindness. In the quiet corners of the galaxy, where hardship and danger still existed, species who had once feared humans now sought friendship. They understood that to help a human in need was to gain an ally whose loyalty could span lifetimes. Even the once feared Karn Dominion had begun to change. They had seen the human strength, not in their weapons, but in their willingness to stand by those who had helped them. Some of their leaders whispered of new ways to live, inspired by a species that valued honor and memory above all else. The new generation on GalacticPrime, the children of both races, grew up together. Schools taught the history of the galaxy, including the time of the humans' exile, the kindness of the Taraki, and the battle that had saved the planet. A young human girl, Sarah, turned to her friend, a Taraki boy named Luan, as they worked on a science project together. "Do you think humans always remember kindness?" she asked. Luan smiled, placing a delicate Taraki crystal in their experiment. "I think they do. My parents told me that's why we are alive today. If humans didn't remember, we might not even exist." Sarah nodded. "Then one day we should remember too and help someone else." And in that simple promise, the cycle of kindness continued. The monuments of memory, in the capital square, the two monuments remained. Leora's statue reached toward the sky, her hands open, her face calm. Beside her, the human monument mirrored her gesture, showing that gratitude and repayment were two sides of the same coin. At the base of the human monument were inscribed the words, "To those who gave kindness and to those who never forgot." Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the monuments, learning the story of how two races had formed a bond that no enemy could break. Some cried quietly, inspired by the courage and honor shown. Others took the story back to their own worlds, teaching the lesson of loyalty, memory, and compassion. The echo of Leora. Though Leora had long passed, her spirit lived on through the acts of humanity. Every rescue, every act of aid, and every fleet that journeyed to help another species carried her memory. Elian often thought of her as he worked with human engineers and scientists. "She started this," he said quietly to Ross one day. "She gave hope to your people when none remained." "We owe her everything," Ross smiled. "Yes, and we repay it not just with gratitude but with action. That is the legacy she left us, and the one we will leave behind." Humanity across the stars' human fleets continued to explore and settle the galaxy. But they did so differently now. Ships carried messages of peace as often as they carried supplies. Diplomats traveled alongside scientists. Teachers and artists joined engineers to help civilizations grow. Everywhere humans went, they were remembered not for their strength, but for their honor. The galaxy learned that kindness, when remembered and repaid, could change the course of worlds. Even in dangerous regions, where pirates or rogue fleets threatened, Humans offered help first. And in every case the legend followed. Help a human, and you gain an ally who will never forget your kindness. The greatest legacy on GalacticPrime. As the sun set and the twin moons rose, Admiral Ross and Lieutenant Mira stood on a hill overlooking the city. Children ran through the fields below, laughing and singing. The monuments glowed softly in the evening light. Mira spoke softly, almost to herself. "Do you think the galaxy will remember us like this?" Ross watched the children, the workers, the two races together in peace. "The galaxy will remember what humans are," he said. "Not just for what we build or the battles we fight, but for the kindness we remember and the promises we keep." The wind carried the laughter of children and the soft hum of machinery. Humanity's legacy was no longer in distant memory. It lived here, in every life touched, in every world saved, and in every heart that believed in honor. A final promise as night fell. The stars over GalacticPrime twinkled brightly. Humans and Tiraki alike looked up, thinking of the worlds beyond. Admiral Ross spoke quietly, almost to the stars themselves. "We remember, and we will repay. That is who we are." And somewhere far in the infinite darkness of space, that promise seemed to shine as a beacon. Across the galaxy, civilizations whispered the truth. Be kind to a human. They will move worlds for you. The galaxy had learned a lesson that no weapon could teach. Humans were strong not because of machines or armies, but because of heart, loyalty, and the courage to act on the promise of kindness. And in every corner of the universe, that legacy lived on.